Alien custom demands the guest earn the favor of the tribe's women HFY. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. James Carter was far from home. He had been assigned to represent Earth at a diplomatic gathering on the alien planet of Zareth, a place where humans had only recently begun to establish relations. The planet was full of alien species, some far more advanced than others, and its people were known for their fierce traditions and strict customs. As he arrived at the ceremonial grounds, James was struck by the vibrant colors of the landscape, giant trees that seemed to pulse with an iridescent glow, and flowers that shimmered in the light of two suns. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices, and the sounds of alien creatures echoed in the distance. It was both beautiful and intimidating. James had heard rumors about the customs of the Zarethians, but he had no idea what to expect. When he was summoned to the central hall, a massive structure made of translucent crystal, he was briefed by the local official. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice smooth but serious, "the Zarethians have a tradition that any guest must earn the favor of our tribe's women. It is not a mere formality, it is a sign of respect and strength. You will be required to participate." James blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Earn the favor," he repeated. "How?" The official simply smiled, her sharp eyes gleaming. "You will understand soon enough." It wasn't long before James found himself standing in the middle of a wide-open arena, surrounded by hundreds of curious Zarethian onlookers. He had been told to demonstrate his worthiness in front of the tribe's women, a task that left him both confused and, if he was being honest, nervous. The women of the tribe were strong and proud, known for their fierce independence and strength. Their opinions were highly valued, and their favor could make or break a man standing in the tribe. As James stood there, his heart racing, the women began to file into the arena. They were unlike any people he had ever seen at all, with skin that shimmered in shades of violet, blue, and gold. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, and they moved with a grace that suggested both strength and control. One woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. She was taller than the rest, with deep purple skin and long silver hair that cascaded down her back. Her eyes locked onto James with a piercing gaze, as though she were sizing him up, evaluating his worth. "I am Kyra," she said, her voice deep and commanding. "You are here to prove yourself. Do you understand the importance of our custom?" James nodded, swallowing his nervousness. "Yes, I understand." Kyra raised an eyebrow, a slight smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Then show us why you deserve our respect. Your task is simple, you must perform in a way that demonstrates strength, intelligence, and honor. Only then will we grant you our favor." With that, the challenge began. James quickly realized that this was no ordinary test. The women of the tribe began to offer him various trials, each one testing a different aspect of his abilities. He had to solve complex puzzles, demonstrate his physical strength by lifting heavy objects, and prove his quick thinking in simulated combat scenarios. As the trials went on, James found himself becoming more and more frustrated. Despite his training, he wasn't prepared for the cultural nuances of this strange, alien ritual. But he refused to give up. He had always prided himself on his determination. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the arena, James was left standing alone in the center, drenched in sweat but proud of his efforts. The women gathered around him, their expressions unreadable. Kyra stepped forward once more, her gaze softer than before. "You have earned our respect," she said, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "You have proven that you possess the qualities we value: strength, intelligence, and honor." James let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He had passed. The tribe's women, their faces glowing with approval, began to cheer softly. It wasn't a victory he had expected, but it was one he had earned. As Kyra approached him again, she offered a nod of approval. You are welcome among us, Commander Carter. Your place here has been secured. James couldn't help but smile, his heart swelling with pride. He had not only proven his worth but had gained the respect of an entire tribe of alien women, something that would go down in history as one of the greatest accomplishments of his career. James Carter stood there, still processing the words of Kyra. His body was sore from the day's trials, but his mind was racing. He had done it, he had earned their respect. It wasn't an easy feat, and he had never expected such a ritual to test him so thoroughly. Yet, as the women gathered around him, their approval was evident in their eyes. He had proven himself worthy of their attention, and it was more than he could have hoped for. Kyra, the towering figure with violet skin and silver hair, stepped forward once more. This time, her expression was different. There was a subtle softness in her gaze, a hint of respect that hadn't been there before. She had watched him closely throughout the trials, her piercing blue eyes never leaving his form. And now, she spoke to him with a calm authority. You have shown that you are more than just a guest, she said, her voice resonating with approval. You are a man of strength and honor. James couldn't help but feel a swell of pride in his chest. It wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about the journey he had undertaken to understand and respect their ways. Thank you, Kyra, he replied, his voice steady. I had no idea what to expect coming here, but I've learned more about your culture than I ever could have imagined. She nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It is not easy for an outsider to understand our customs, but you have done so with grace and resilience. That is why you have earned our favor. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. James could see the others in the tribe now watching him with new eyes. The women who had once viewed him as an intruder now regarded him with a newfound respect. It was a subtle shift, but it was enough. As the sun began to set over the alien horizon, casting a golden hue across the arena, the tribe began to disperse. James felt a wave of relief wash over him, but there was something else too, an unexpected connection. As the last of the tribe's members left, Kyra lingered behind. Her gaze softened as she looked at him. You are not like the others, she said quietly, almost as if to herself. James raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. How so? You do not seek to dominate, she explained. You seek to understand. That is rare among your kind. Her words struck him more deeply than he expected. He had never thought of himself as anything special, just a man doing his job. But hearing it from Kyra, from someone who had seen so much of the galaxy, made him realize something. Maybe he had underestimated the impact of his actions. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more to being human than he had ever realized. I believe that understanding is the only way to truly connect with others, James said, his voice thoughtful. In my experience, it's not about proving your strength, but about earning trust. Kyra studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then, with a small nod, she turned to walk away, her graceful movements leaving a trail of shimmering light in the fading sunlight. You are wise, human, she said over her shoulder. That wisdom will serve you well here. James watched her go, feeling a strange sense of fulfillment. He had come to this alien world unsure of what to expect, but now, he felt like he had gained something priceless. Not just the respect of an alien tribe, but a deeper understanding of himself and the universe. As he made his way back to his quarters, the weight of the day's events settled on him. He had earned their respect, but more importantly, he had earned his own. And that, he realized, was the true victory. The following days after the trials were a blur of diplomacy and cultural exchange for James Carter. Despite the initial shock of his mission, he had begun to feel more at home among the Zorithians. Their customs were strange, but their respect was real, and the warm, approving glances from the women in the tribe made him feel as though he had earned his place here. His task now was to assist with the diplomatic efforts between Earth and the Zorithian people, and while it was far from simple, he found a certain satisfaction in it. On one particularly clear afternoon, as the twin suns hung low in the sky, James was summoned to the royal hall. He was told that Queen Nisara, the ruler of the Zorithian dominion, wished to meet with him personally. It was an honor, and James had no idea what to expect. As he entered the vast chamber, the air was thick with the scent of incense and the soft hum of alien instruments. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, each one depicting the history of the Zerithian people in vibrant detail. At the far end of the room, seated upon a large crystal throne, was the queen herself. Her presence was overwhelming. Her deep red skin shimmered in the soft light, and her eyes, like liquid sapphire, seemed to pierce through him. She was tall, almost regal, and her silver hair cascaded down her back like a river of light. As James approached, he could feel his pulse quicken. This was the woman who commanded an entire empire, and she had summoned him for a reason. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice smooth and commanding, yet not without warmth. "It is good to finally meet you. Your reputation precedes you." James bowed slightly, his military training kicking in. "Your Majesty," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "It is an honor to be in your presence." Queen Nisara studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing. "You have earned the respect of my people, Commander. Not many outsiders can say that." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But there is more to our relationship than just respect. I would like to know more about Earth, about the people I am entrusting my future to." James nodded, understanding the gravity of her request. "Of course, Your Majesty. Earth is a young planet, but we are rapidly growing and evolving. We value freedom, cooperation, and progress. We believe that working together, with respect for one another, we can achieve great things." The Queen's eyes softened ever so slightly. "I have heard much of your people's resilience and their ability to adapt. It is what drew us to Earth in the first place." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "But what of your people's hearts, Commander? What is it that drives you, deep down? I wish to understand that as well." James felt a flicker of surprise. It was not often that he was asked such a personal question by someone in such a position of power. But there was something about her, something in her eyes, that made him want to answer honestly. "What drives us, Your Majesty, is our belief in connection. We are driven to understand each other, to learn from one another, and to build a better future together." The Queen's gaze softened further. "That is a noble sentiment," she said, her voice almost wistful. "Perhaps there is hope for us after all." The air between them seemed to crackle with an unspoken understanding. They were two leaders from vastly different worlds, yet there was a common thread between them. A desire for something greater than themselves. As the meeting continued, James found himself speaking more freely than he had anticipated. He told the Queen about Earth's struggles and triumphs, the challenges they faced, and the dreams they held. In return, she spoke of her people's history, their battles, their victories, and the burdens of leadership that she carried. By the end of the conversation, James felt as though he had made a connection that went beyond politics. It was something deeper, something that could potentially bridge the gap between their two worlds. As the meeting concluded, Queen Nisara stood and extended her hand to him. "You are a rare human, Commander Carter," she said with a smile that was both regal and warm. "I am pleased to have met you." James took her hand, feeling the weight of the moment. "The honor is mine, Your Majesty." As he left the royal hall, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was much more to be done, more challenges to face, and more connections to be made. But for the first time since he had arrived, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just an ambassador anymore, he was a part of something much larger. And that was the greatest honor of all. The days that followed his meeting with Queen Nisara were filled with a strange sense of anticipation for James Carter. He had been invited into the royal circle, his presence now accepted not only by the tribe but by the leadership of the entire Zerithian dominion. It was a rare honor, one that most ambassadors could only dream of. Yet, as he sat in his quarters that evening, the weight of his new role was settling in. He had come to this planet as a simple diplomat, but now, it felt as if he were part of something much larger, something that could change the course of history. The evening air was cool as he stepped outside, the twin suns having dipped below the horizon. The alien landscape before him was bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent plants, casting long shadows across the stone pathways. It was beautiful, almost surreal, and yet James couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift. The sounds of distant voices echoed in the air as he walked through the palace gardens. It was then that he saw Kyra again, standing near a group of the tribe's leaders. She was engaged in conversation with them, her posture relaxed yet commanding. Her violet skin shimmered in the soft light, and her silver hair seemed to catch the last rays of the sun, creating a halo effect. As she noticed James approaching, she excused herself from the group and walked toward him. "Commander," she greeted him with a slight nod. "I see you're settling in well." James offered a smile in return. "It's hard not to when the surroundings are as beautiful as this." He gestured to the glowing plants around them. Kyra's eyes followed his gaze, and she smiled, though there was a hint of something deeper in her expression. "Yes," she said softly. "Our world is full of wonders. But it is not just the beauty of the land that makes our people strong. It is our ability to adapt, to evolve with the times." James tilted his head slightly, intrigued. "And how do you mean?" Kyra stepped closer, her voice lowering. "We are a people of tradition, yes. But we are also a people of change. We learn, we grow, we make our place in the galaxy. We understand that respect must be earned, and not simply given." She paused for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "Your presence here has not only earned you respect among my people, but it has also made others think. You have demonstrated strength, honor, and intelligence." James nodded, though he was still processing the weight of her words. "I'm just trying to do my part," he replied. Kyra's eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. "You are more than just a diplomat, Commander. You are becoming a symbol of the potential for cooperation between our worlds." Her voice was steady, but there was something in her gaze that suggested she wasn't just speaking about politics anymore. It was as though she was seeing something in him that he hadn't quite realized himself. "I don't know about that," James said, his tone light but thoughtful. "I'm just trying to understand, to build bridges where I can." Kyra's smile softened, and for a brief moment, the fierce warrior she was known to be seemed to fade away. "Understanding is the key," she said. "And you, Commander, are doing more than just building bridges. You are forging a path to a future none of us could have imagined." James felt the weight of her words sink in. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about something much greater. The connection between Earth and the Zerithian people had the potential to reshape the galaxy. And somehow, he had become a part of that change. As they stood there, the night fully enveloping the gardens in its cool embrace, James realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he was no longer just an outsider. He was now a part of this world, and that knowledge filled him with a sense of purpose. The universe was vast, and their place in it was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, James felt as though he was where he was meant to be. As the weeks passed, James Carter became more deeply entrenched in his new role on Zareth. His initial task of building diplomatic bridges had grown into something far more complex, a delicate dance between understanding alien customs and representing Earth in a way that fostered mutual respect. The people of Zareth were fascinated by Earth, not just for its technological advancements, but for the humans themselves, resilient, curious, and above all, capable of forging connections across vast cultural divides. Despite the respect he had gained, James still felt like a visitor in a strange land. His quarters in the palace were comfortable, but every day brought new challenges. He was learning to navigate the nuances of Zerithian society, how they viewed strength, how they valued honor, and, most importantly, how they saw cooperation between worlds. One afternoon, as he reviewed a diplomatic report in his quarters, there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," he called, looking up to see Kyra standing in the doorway. She looked different today, her usual warrior demeanor softened, her posture more relaxed. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice carrying a sense of warmth he hadn't heard from her before. "I wanted to speak with you." James stood, instinctively straightening as she entered. "Of course, Kyra. What's on your mind?" She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I have noticed something, Commander. You've been here for quite some time now, and yet, you are still an outsider in many ways. But you have earned our respect. More than that, you've earned my trust." James felt a sudden shift in the air, a subtle change in their dynamic. "Thank you, Kyra," he said, his voice sincere. "That means a lot to me." Kyra moved closer, her eyes searching his face. "It is not just about diplomacy, James. It is about understanding what drives us all. You, as a human, understand that more than many other species. Your kind's resilience, your ability to adapt, that is what makes Earth unique." James smiled faintly. "I think we're more similar than you realize. It's not just about adapting, it's about learning from each other." There was a moment of silence between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Kyra's gaze softened, and for a brief instant, the tension that had always been there seemed to dissipate. "You have changed my perspective, Commander," she said quietly. "I never thought I would see a human as an equal, but you have shown me that there is much more to your species than we could have ever imagined." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. James wasn't sure how to respond. This was not a conversation he had expected. "I'm just one person," he said finally, a touch of humility in his voice. "But I believe that by understanding each other, we can build something greater than just a diplomatic alliance." Kyra smiled, her expression softening further. "And that is what makes you different, James Carter. You do not seek to conquer or control, you seek to understand and build bridges. That is why we respect you." James felt a warmth spread through him at her words. It was a strange feeling, being respected by someone who had once seen him as an outsider. "Thank you, Kyra," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't take that lightly." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. For James, this was a turning point. He had come to Zareth with a mission, but now, he felt like he was part of something larger, something that could truly change the future for both humans and Zarethians. Kyra spoke again, breaking the silence. "I have a proposal, Commander. A new mission, one that will require both of us. It is time for us to take the next step, to show both our peoples that cooperation is not just possible, it is essential." James's heart raced with anticipation. "What kind of mission?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Kyra's gaze turned serious, her eyes filled with purpose. "A mission that will test the very foundation of our alliance. A mission that will determine whether the future of both our worlds is truly in our hands." James nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. This was more than just a diplomatic mission, it was a challenge that could reshape the destiny of two civilizations. And he was ready to face it, with Kyra by his side. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. James Carter had agreed to the mission Kyra proposed, though the specifics remained unclear. As they worked together to gather information, both Earth and Zarethian diplomats were involved in securing the details. It was a critical task that, if successful, would set the stage for a new era of collaboration between their two worlds. The stakes were high, but James couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was more than just a professional duty, it was personal. As he sat in his quarters late one evening, studying the intel they had gathered, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Commander," Kyra's voice called out from the other side. "Are you ready to begin?" James stood, stretching his stiff muscles. The day had been long, filled with discussions and planning, and he was eager to finally get moving. He opened the door to find Kyra standing there, as poised and confident as ever. "Always ready," he replied, offering a small smile. Kyra raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "You're not nervous?" she asked, her tone almost teasing. James chuckled. "Nervous? I've been through a lot. I think I can handle whatever comes next." Kyra seemed to consider his words for a moment before nodding. "Good. Because this will not be easy." They walked together to the command center, where the mission's planning would take place. As they entered, James noticed the large holographic map of Zareth and Earth's territories displayed in the center of the room. Several other members of both the Zarethian and Earth diplomatic teams were already gathered around, discussing various aspects of the mission. James took his place among them, glancing over the detailed reports. The plan was simple in theory: they would work together to mediate a delicate trade agreement between Earth and a neighboring planet in the Zarethian system. The issue was one of resources. Both Earth and the Zerithian Dominion had stakes in the trade, but tensions with the neighboring planet had made negotiations difficult. James's role was to act as a liaison, using his diplomatic skills to help both sides reach an agreement. But as Kyra had hinted, it wasn't going to be as straightforward as it seemed. As the meeting continued, it became clear just how much was at stake. A failed negotiation could lead to a breakdown in relations, not just between the two parties involved but potentially between Earth and the entire Zerithian Dominion. It was a heavy burden to carry, but James wasn't the type to shy away from a challenge. After hours of discussion, they finally reached a plan of action. James felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as he left the command center. Kyra walked beside him, her pace steady. "Do you feel the pressure?" she asked, her voice low. James glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "A little, but it's nothing I can't handle." She nodded, seeming to accept his answer. "I believe in you, Commander. This mission is as much about building trust as it is about securing a trade deal. Your role is critical in making sure both sides feel heard and respected." James appreciated her confidence in him, but he knew the road ahead would not be easy. He wasn't just negotiating for resources, he was negotiating for the future of both worlds. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him. But he stood tall, determined to succeed. "I won't let you down, Kyra," he said, his voice firm. She glanced at him, her expression softening for a moment. "I know you won't. Let's do this together." The following day, they embarked on their journey to the neighboring planet. The mission ahead would test everything James had learned about diplomacy, about trust, and about himself. As the ship soared through the stars, he couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. This wasn't just a mission. It was a turning point for both Earth and Zareth. And James Carter was determined to make sure it was a success. The ship carrying James Carter and Kyra soared through the vast expanse of space, its sleek hull cutting through the darkness like a silver streak. As they approached the neighboring planet where the trade negotiations would take place, James felt a quiet anticipation build within him. The journey had been long, but the weight of the mission was what truly occupied his thoughts. He had been entrusted with a task of immense importance, and he wasn't about to let anything derail the delicate negotiations. Kyra, standing beside him at the ship's observation window, seemed equally focused. Her violet skin shimmered in the soft light, and her silvery hair glowed faintly. Though her expression remained calm and composed, James could tell she was just as aware of the stakes as he was. "We're getting closer," she said, her voice steady, though there was a hint of something deeper in her tone, something that mirrored the unease James felt. "This will not be easy," James replied, his gaze fixed on the swirling colors of the planet below. The surface was a mix of vast, rugged landscapes and sprawling cities, a clear sign of the civilization that had once flourished here. "But I believe we can do it," he added, his voice firm. Kyra turned to him, her blue eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him pause. "You don't just believe it, do you?" she asked. "You know it." James met her gaze and nodded. "Yes. I know it. We have to make this work, for both of our peoples." There was a moment of silence between them, the weight of their shared resolve filling the space. They both understood what was at stake, not just the trade deal, but the future of their two worlds. As the ship descended into the atmosphere, the sound of the engine's changing pitch signaled their arrival. They were about to meet with leaders from the neighboring planet, a race of beings that had been wary of Earth's growing influence in the galaxy. James had studied their history and culture, and he knew the negotiation would not be easy. But he had faced challenges before, and he was ready to meet this one head-on. The landing was smooth, and the ship touched down on the planet's surface with minimal turbulence. As the doors opened, James stepped out into the crisp air, the scent of the planet's unique flora filling his lungs. The landscape before them was both alien and strangely familiar, a mix of towering rock formations and lush greenery, with cities nestled between. A group of dignitaries stood waiting for them, their bright clothing and elaborate headdresses marking them as leaders of this world. Their expressions were unreadable, but James could feel their eyes on him, evaluating, assessing. Kyra stood by his side, her presence a silent reminder of the importance of the mission. Commander Carter, one of the leaders, spoke, his voice rich and deep. "Welcome to our world. We trust your presence here means Earth is serious about the negotiations. James nodded, offering a firm handshake. We are here to listen and to find common ground. We understand the importance of this deal and the potential it holds for both our peoples. The leader nodded but said nothing more, signaling that the meeting had officially begun. James followed him and the others into the grand hall, the towering pillars of stone and crystal creating an imposing atmosphere. As they took their seats at the long table, the tension in the room was palpable. The negotiations were about to begin, and James knew that every word, every decision, would have far-reaching consequences. He glanced at Kyra, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. They had prepared for this moment, but the true test would come in how they navigated the delicate balance of diplomacy and trust. James straightened in his chair, focusing on the task ahead. He wasn't just representing Earth, he was representing the future. And with Kyra by his side, he knew they could overcome any obstacle. The journey ahead would be difficult, but together, they had the potential to change the course of history. The negotiation room was tense, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional murmur from the Zerithian diplomats seated around the large, oval table. James Carter sat at the head, his gaze shifting from one alien leader to the next, each of them watching him closely. He had been briefed on the intricacies of the trade deal, what Earth needed, what the neighboring planet demanded, and where both sides could compromise, but nothing prepared him for the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a meeting of minds, it was a moment that could define the future of their civilizations. Kyra sat beside him, her presence steady and calming. Her violet skin seemed to shimmer under the soft lighting, her silver hair flowing elegantly behind her as she focused intently on the proceedings. Her position was clear, she was not just a bodyguard or an assistant, but a critical player in these talks. James glanced at her once, finding reassurance in her unwavering composure. The representatives from the neighboring planet were formidable, their eyes sharp and calculating. They were cautious, their posture stiff with the weight of distrust. But James knew that this was his chance to break through that barrier. He had learned that the true power of diplomacy lay not in words, but in understanding the unspoken. We are here today to discuss our future, James began, his voice steady as he addressed the table. Not just for our planets, but for our people. Earth and Zareth share a common goal, progress. But that progress is only possible if we work together, if we trust each other. The room remained silent, but the tension seemed to ease ever so slightly. James continued, feeling the weight of the moment lift as his confidence grew. We know what's at stake, he said, glancing around the table, meeting the eyes of the alien leaders. Our planet's resources are limited, but our potential is limitless. We believe that by sharing, by collaborating, we can help each other grow. He paused, allowing his words to settle. But we must not be afraid to face the uncomfortable truths. Trust is not given freely. It must be earned. A murmur rippled through the room, and one of the alien leaders, a tall being with pale blue skin, spoke up. You speak of trust, human, but our people have been betrayed before. What makes you think your word will hold weight? James didn't flinch. He had anticipated this question. Because Earth understands what it means to fight for what's right, he replied, his voice unwavering. We've made mistakes, yes. But we have learned from them. And we are here to make things right. The alien leader studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. Perhaps, he said, his voice low but thoughtful. But words are not enough. Actions will speak louder. James smiled, the corner of his mouth lifting. Then let our actions begin today. He turned to Kyra, who nodded in silent agreement. They had done everything they could to prepare for this moment, but now it was time to act. As the talks progressed, the atmosphere shifted. The alien leaders began to speak more openly, their skepticism slowly giving way to genuine curiosity. They wanted to see if Earth's words matched its deeds. And for James, that meant everything. As the meeting drew to a close, James felt a sense of cautious optimism. They had made progress, but the true test was still ahead. Trust would take time to build, but this was a step in the right direction. He exchanged a final look with Kyra, who gave him a small, approving nod. It wasn't over yet, but they were on the right path. Thank you, James said, standing up and extending his hand to the leader of the neighboring planet. We look forward to working together. The alien leader shook his hand, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. We will see, he said cryptically. But we are watching. Do not disappoint us, human. James returned the smile, his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't a guarantee of success, but it was a victory nonetheless. As he left the room with Kyra by his side, he knew the real work was just beginning. But for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. They had taken the first step toward a future of cooperation, and with Kyra's support, he knew they could face whatever came next. The days that followed the diplomatic meeting were a blend of cautious optimism and intense preparations. The initial talks had ended on a positive note, but James Carter knew that it was just the beginning. Trust was a fragile thing, and while the neighboring planet's leaders had shown some openness, it would take time to fully earn their confidence. James spent his days working alongside Kyra, reviewing the terms of the trade deal, meeting with Earth representatives, and continuing to build rapport with the Zerithians. Despite the seemingly endless meetings, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this mission than he had originally thought. One evening, as the sun set over the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, James found himself in a quiet courtyard, deep in thought. The peaceful surroundings did little to ease the tension in his mind. The weight of the mission felt heavier now. Kyra had been quiet for most of the day, focused on her own tasks, but she appeared beside him in the courtyard, her presence as commanding as ever. You're troubled, she said, her voice low but perceptive. James sighed, looking out at the horizon. I just can't shake the feeling that we're on the brink of something important, but at the same time, it feels like everything could fall apart in an instant. Kyra studied him for a moment, her blue eyes sharp and unwavering. It's natural to feel that way. You've taken on a responsibility far greater than you realize. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. But you've already proven your worth, James. You've shown the Zerithians that you are not just a diplomat, but a bridge between our worlds. James turned to face her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I'm trying, Kyra. But it's hard not to feel the weight of it all. The stakes are high, and there's so much more we need to accomplish. Kyra's gaze softened, and for the first time, she seemed more like a companion than a warrior. You're not alone in this, she said. I'm here with you, and so are the people of Zareth. Together, we can make this work. James met her gaze, his heart racing with gratitude. In that moment, he realized just how much her words meant. She had become more than just an ally, she had become a friend. As the evening wore on, James found himself reflecting on his journey so far. He had come to Zareth as a stranger, an outsider, but now he felt connected to this world in a way he hadn't expected. The challenges ahead were still daunting, but with Kyra by his side and the support of both Earth and Zareth, he felt ready to face them. The next day, the negotiations resumed. The neighboring planet's leaders had sent a message requesting further discussions, and James knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for. It was time to finalize the trade deal and solidify the future of their alliance. The meeting room was filled with tension as both parties sat down at the long table. The alien leaders were still cautious, but the respect in their eyes was undeniable. James took a deep breath, his mind focused. This was it, the culmination of everything he had worked for. As the discussions began, James spoke with confidence, carefully navigating the complex terms of the agreement. The room was quiet as he addressed each issue, ensuring that both sides were heard and that the deal would benefit everyone. It wasn't easy, but he could see the change in the room. The distrust was slowly fading, replaced by a sense of understanding. By the end of the meeting, they had reached an agreement. The trade deal was set, and both Earth and Zareth had forged a partnership that would last for generations. As the meeting concluded, the leaders from the neighboring planet stood and extended their hands to James. You have done what no one thought possible, one of them said. You have earned our trust. James shook the leader's hand, feeling a sense of pride wash over him. This was more than just a victory for him, it was a victory for both worlds. As he left the room, Kyra by his side, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time since arriving on Zareth, James felt hopeful about the future. Together, they had taken the first step toward a new era of cooperation, and he knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together.